What's your name? What's your name?
My name is Mike Jones.
What were you doing during the 9/11 attacks? How did you find out?
I was on my own company airplane going to Omaha, Nebraska to visit my job site. And on the way up there, my pilot turned around and got very concerned. And he said, "Mike, I don't know what's going on, but every airplane in the United States has been grounded. And so we're going to have to pull in here, and I don't know when we can get out and fly back to Kansas City." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I don't know." And so we got to Omaha and we landed and we went into the fixed base operation. That's where small airplanes and jets land and go in. And I walked in and everybody was watching TV. And I thought, well, I don't know why the heck they're watching TV. It looks like that movie where that gorilla climbs up on top of the wall, that great big tall building, and everybody's watching that. And then all of a sudden, they all say, "Oh, there's another plane coming." And so I had to watch it to see what was going on. And all of a sudden, it dawned on us that those airplanes were collapsing the World Trade Center. And so we went ahead and went to our job site in Omaha and came back, and my pilot said, "Well, we're not going anywhere. We can't go anywhere. And so we're going to have to drive home." And in the meantime, at the airport, we saw this great big jet airplane flying around. And I looked up and I said, "That looks like the United States President's airplane, Air Force One." And sure enough, it was. And he was landing in Omaha and at the Air Force Base. And he was down in Miami, Florida, visiting a grade school, and he got the word about the World Trade Center collapse. And so they took him up to hide in the Air Force Base in Omaha. And so he was flying around and he landed there. And so that's where he first found out what all was going on about the attack. And little did I know that about 2 or 3 weeks later, I would be out in New York City trying to figure out how to cope with the collapse of the World Trade Center and getting the debris out and figure out how to get the bodies out of the collapse of the World Trade Center. And our job ended up being bringing our people and our equipment out from Kansas City and installing tiebacks. The tiebacks then eventually, as the excavation was made to clean up the debris, the tiebacks would hold back what they called the bathtub wall. The bathtub wall was the basement under the World Trade Center. It was like 70 foot deep, and that's where all the trains came in, and there were shopping centers and parking garages and a whole little city underneath the World Trade Centers. And so my job was to drill these tiebacks through the existing foundation walls. And we would drill down to what they call the mica schist, which is the underlying soil that underlines Manhattan Island, New York City. And we would drill down at least 110 foot deep, and then we would inject the drill holes with a cement grout and drop what they call a tieback, which was a cable, large cable, into the grout, the full length of the tieback. And as the grout set up, the grout being concrete, we would attach hydraulic jacks to the cables and load those cables up to like 150 tons each, and that would hold back that existing bathtub wall. And because each floor was tied into the excavation of the bathtub walls, and as they were all cut loose, there's nothing to keep them from caving in as we dug the debris out. And so we had to put these tiebacks to hold the wall in, keep it from collapsing. And if the tiebacks or if the walls did collapse, the entire Potomac River would fill up the bathtub walls and the foundations, which, as I say, was at 70 foot deep, and that would follow the subways all the way into New York City and completely flood underground New York. And so they could not have the bathtub walls collapsing. And these were large concrete walls, as I say, went down 70 foot deep, and they were held up by existing floors, but the floors were no longer there, so as all the debris get dug out, those had to be tied back and kept the wall from caving in, and which we did. And so we would work night and day, working with the New York laborers and unions, which were very difficult to work with, because they were all they wanted to do is try to make as much money as they possibly could and steal outside contractors blind. And so that was their main goal. So we got through it. We put our tiebacks in. Then came the real problem of us getting paid for our work. And we had a huge payroll, a huge equipment suppliers, and concrete and steel. And it was a difficult job trying to get money to pay us back for all of our work we did. We finally got it done, and it worked out. And so after about 5 trips back and forth to New York, I was able to collect what they owed us. And it was not a very fun job, to say the least. Anytime a body was found, we would have to shut the job down, and everybody would have to go back to their quarters, wherever they would stay, wherever they were stationed, and wait until the siren went off. It was all clear to go back to work. And that happened multiple times. And of course, we had to keep paying everybody on the job site all that time that they're all standing around doing nothing. So there was no chance of getting any work accomplished. So that's why it took us so long, and it cost so much more than what we thought, even though it was a cost plus job for us. And that's essentially what happened, and that's what we did out in New York. We had to bring most of all of our own people in, shut our own jobs down here in this part of the country and everywhere else. We had 5 different companies around, locations for our companies around the United States, and a number of those guys had to shut their jobs down to come out and help us. So it was an entire company-wide project to save the bathtub walls in New York at the World Trade Center. Then we also got involved in working with the other damaged areas of New York, and the Pentagon in Washington, and so that basically is what we did. And we'll have Caden bring a couple pictures so you can see. That's me at the Trade Center directly. See the smoke coming up out of the debris that had been burned. And
okay, what was your immediate reaction to the attacks?
well, as I said before, when we landed and I went into the airport in New York, I didn't know what was going on. Because everybody was just staring at the TV. So after we finally found out, I thought, boy, I don't know what to think about this. And then I started getting calls from the people in New York asking if I would come out and look at it and see what I could do to help. Because we were one of the few companies in the United States that could perform this type of work, where we had to have this huge equipment and all these people to install these tiebacks. I got on the job site after a couple of weeks, and it looked like as if you were thinking about going to hell that may be your first appearance of hell. It was just not a very good situation, to say the least.
Do you consider September 11th to be a pivotal event in your life and the history of the United States and the world history? Did September 11th change things? For example, your personal life, your view of the United States and the world?
Well, it probably did, because just trying to determine who it was behind the attacks and trying to determine what country forced this to happen to the United States, then anybody that was involved in it or involved in any way in the United States, which is 90% of, or maybe more, of everybody in the United States, had to be aware of the fact that there was somebody trying to attack the whole United States. And so naturally the people of the United States would turn against those people that tried to ruin our country. And they're still doing that, and they still haven't got to the bottom of it all.
Do you think September 11th offers any lessons for people in the United States?
I think after the 20 years now, there's so many people that forgot all about it, and so many people that don't know anything about it. It's good to keep talking about it and you keep doing what you're doing, so more and more people, as they get older, that wasn't around during the attack, would be aware of it, so they could be aware of what goes on in the past, like in the history of the United States, and continue to figure that this might happen again, and what would we do if it does happen again. And so everybody needs to be aware of this is something that definitely could happen again, and it may be worse than what that was, with thousands of people getting killed.
What do you remember about the response of people in the United States, the international community, the U.S. government?
Most people were in such shock, it took a while for them to even understand what was going on. And just like I said, when President Bush was leaving Florida, he didn't know what was going on, but they just said it had been attacked. So the job of the security was to get President Bush somewhere where nobody knew where he would be, and he would have to go into the caves in Omaha, and hide back into the caves to protect him, since he was the president, and the security's biggest job was to protect the president. And so if he had been anywhere else, and if the plane would have hit the White House, then that would have been a disaster. And I'm not saying that may even happen someday.